frankly, you have heard of IBS probably. How many of you have irritable bowel syndrome? These are the terms, you see. Modern medicine brings all these new terms, and as you can see, because I am trying to impress you on holistic side, it may look like bashing, but I also like the strengths of modern medicine. It can do marvelous surgery, it can clear heart disease, and I'll talk about all that. But bear with me. What happens is they give a name like Crohn's disease, and then they say it is incurable. And they say, okay, then you take this drug for life, just to maintain the thing. Sinusitis, take antihistamine for life, or allergy. Or take, whatsoever, Vioxx. My point is, if the number of chronic diseases keep increasing, and the drugs we have to keep taking every day, and these are expensive drugs, healthcare cost is going to go up. That's a simple economics. 1 out of 2 people in America, and probably it's true, maybe not to the same degree, but it's true for the rest of the planet. 1 out of 2 people suffer from chronic disease in America. And chronic disease could be as simple as allergy, seasonal allergy, or as complex as cancer or diabetes or heart disease. By the way, heart disease is a chronic disease too, even though when we get a bypass or an angioplasty, it's a chronic disease. They put us on medicine, and I'll talk about that. So, as an economics professor, I'm looking at this scenario, and I'm saying, wow, the country right now, the GDP of this country is about $11 trillion. It's a rich country. We spend 15% of that GDP we spend on healthcare. That turns out to be $5,800 per man, per woman, per child. That is 2 times to 3 times the GDP per capita of China. And it is almost 8 times GDP per capita of India. That's just on healthcare. And that healthcare cost is increasing at the rate of 4 times inflation. So it's like growing like cancer inside this whole GDP. That's why you will find, and the pharmaceutical companies, they basically want to make more drugs in this model. So that's where we are. That's another reason I'm speaking. All right? That the model that we have right now, what has happened is basically modern medicine has said, oh, your key is lost in this room, in that example that I gave you. They don't say that, look, there could be a cure in other forms of medicine that we don't know. They authoritatively say, there's no cure, you take this antihistamine. Or you have a Crohn's disease. But you know what? That was not a Crohn's disease. That was a result of the antibiotic that she took for acne treatment. This poor teenager, my daughter. In that research, I found about Candida. In that research. How many of you have heard about Candida? Okay. Now again, thanks to the books here, and this is why I'm here in the library. This is my first talk. Look at this person, William Crook, MD. He died a year ago. He spent his life telling people about yeast infection. And these are library books. This one, of course, is not a library book, but this is another doctor, Dr. Orion Truss. He wrote about the missing diagnosis. These books were written 20 years ago. But the problem is they were clinicians. They didn't have the test, and still a test has not been developed to say a person has, a good test hasn't been developed, that a person has Candida. So what has happened is modern medicine says, oh, this MRI, this CAT scan, this thing, this blood test, I know that this thing relates to such and such. But if there's no test, then they basically said that disease doesn't exist. Now this book is interesting because what this book says is that things from depression to irritable bowel syndrome to eczema to sinusitis are related to the yeast infection. This is the missing diagnosis. But these are the minority opinion in modern medicine that have not taken off. All right? So, thanks to again these two doctors, Dr. Orion Truss and Dr. Crook, that when I went to internet, I researched about it because I'm an analytical person. So far in October, nobody has said I have candida, but I'm coming to the background that I was researching about it. Now, I was researching about this missing diagnosis because my brother, my own brother, he is 4 or 5 years older, younger than me, and he was taking all these antidepressants for the last 20 years. When in reality, he didn't have depression. Later, they diagnosed him with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. Have you heard of those names?
Yes. Yeah.
And, by the way, there's no treatment for those things.
Right.
And there's only holistic treatment. And, as I was reading about it, they said that that's also could be related to yeast infection. Okay, so far I had gathered information about candida. I was miserable. I was miserable for following reasons. I couldn't sleep in the night, and in the daytime I was tired. And the reason I couldn't sleep is, first, my mucus was just not allowing me to breathe properly. And then if I would sleep, then I would snore. And at that time, my teenage daughter will also come into our room. Says, Dad, you are snoring. My point is, I couldn't help it, right? But what the result was that I had fatigue, I had all these sinusitis, I had eczema for the last 18, 20 years. Hemorrhoids had developed. Okay. Urinary tract infection, men that don't have that usually. For the last 3-4 years, I would have recurrent urinary tract infection. They will give me antibiotics. I had to go through